Thank you so much. Please be seated. The state directors of security that are here with us, eminent faculty members, members of the NIS alumni, distinguished graduating participants, gentlemen of the press, ladies and gentlemen. In fact, when I got the invitation to speak, and when I looked at the title, I said, but in a nation like ours, passing through a period of a slightly depressed economy, every day in the morning, you only tune your television, it's economy that they discuss. So what am I coming to tell these eminent scholars that they don't know? I say, probably just as a ritual, let me come and just have a little conversation with you, but not to really give you information that you don't really know. I thank the Director General, State Services, Commandant and Management of the National Institute for Security Studies for inviting me to this program. It is with utmost sense of patriotism and honor that I join all of you at this year's graduation ceremony of the Executive Intelligence Management course. Let me start by acknowledging the importance of regular courses like this that are focusing on intelligence because of their relevance to the security and the economy of any nation. The topic I am to discuss is quite an interesting one: repositioning Nigerian economy for sustainable development, prospects, and challenges. It's interesting because I am addressing the National Institute for Security Studies, which is not primarily designed to manage the economy of nations. But one thing that people tend to overlook is that security and economic development are so inextricably linked. The word economics originated from two Greek words, oikos, meaning household, and nomos, meaning law. Economics, therefore, has to do with the laws governing the management of the household. Household, in this sense, could mean the community or the state. Human beings, by nature, have the tendency to contravene the law. You are scholars in this area. It may be debatable. But my personal thinking is that naturally there is this tendency of human beings to challenge authorities. And I started thinking about that when I was in primary school. That was in '69, when I was writing my first school leaving certificate exams. That was the period of the Civil War. And we have SCAT movement. I was also a member of the SCAT movement in the community then. But then I was away when my community hosted the SCAT movement across my local government area. But when I came back to the village, the small children in primary school in the villages, the only song they remembered was the one that was sung by one of the SCAT formations. That in our language said that, look, if you are not, it's cautioning or admonishing people, young people, that if you are not a member of our SCAT group, don't sing our songs. But that's the only song they remember to sing. They want to challenge the SCAT movement. Why do you say we should not sing your song? They forget every other song. So I feel that that's as small children. So by nature, human beings tend to challenge authorities. So human beings by nature have the tendency to contravene the law. This requires that for one to effectively manage the household, which is the basis of economic, the people must be kept in check through the application of established laws. Security is the foundation on which nations are built, which you know very well. It is the basic requirement of a state, established in all our constitutions, the primary objective of government. The attainment of reasonable security guarantees economic growth, sustainable development, and safeguard human rights and dignity. The most peaceful countries, if you look at the Australian-based Institute for Economic and Peace, they have what they call the Global Peace Index. And any year they publish the Global Peace Index, it's two things that are very clear. Countries that have marred with conflicts are at the bottom of the development. The countries that are peaceful are at the top. So you really see the link between security and economic development. The concept of sustainable development. The concept of sustainable development got into prominence in 1987 with the publication of the United Nations Brundtland Report, also known as Our Common Future. It emphasizes development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Sustainable development has the capacity to fundamentally strengthen adaptive capability and safeguard the long-term prospect of a nation's economy in the face of depleting natural resources. Sustainable development has one central message. It speaks eloquently of the fact that today's development should not be at the expense of tomorrow. The key requirements in order to attain sustainable development are hinged on meeting basic human needs, such as wealth creation, ensuring environmental sustainability, as well as guaranteeing justice and equity, both within and between generations. Economic sustainability, which encompasses economic diversity, as well as the accumulation of man-made capital and technical progress, does not stand on its own. It draws upon and is strengthened by natural capital from the environment, as well as social and human capital from the society. When you look at insecurity and conflicts, which we are all specialists, security is a core value of human life. The United Nations Development Program idea of human security speaks to the dignity of the human spirit as it pertains to freedom from poverty and despair. Security, in this sense, is understood not only to meet protection of people's basic freedoms, but also establishes the link between peace and development. It encompasses also the creation of appropriate structures to protect people's integrity and dignity, as well as the ability to make a living. At the minimum, human security means freedom from violence and freedom from the fear of violence itself. Because the fear of violence alone is even worse than even the violence itself. Citizens therefore sleep and wake up with many expectations from their government. In most cases, some of these expectations are captured as rights. The access to these rights by citizens guarantee peace and security. And in a democratic setting, these rights are so much amplified by civil society activists. Within the framework of sustainable development discourse, most basic human needs are captured as human security issues. The nexus between security and sustainable development, therefore, is the fact that peace is the foundation for social growth and human fulfillment. The commitment of government to human needs is what guarantees security. Traditionally, people feel that survival pressure makes people to commit crime. Of course, it's just like sometimes psychologists will say people disagree because two people may use one word to mean two different things or use different words to mean the same thing, and that brings communication gap and that leads to disagreement. Yes, that may be the primary need of disagreement. So as much as we agree that survival pressure may be a key factor in causing insecurity, but in Nigeria and most other African countries, other factors are becoming quite significant, which I believe you've discussed over this period of time. We'll look at them briefly. These include ethnic conflicts, skewed and nebulous ideology, cult rivalry, contestation for political power, which is now key in Africa. If we look at issues of ethnic conflicts, which are well known, I don't need to read through, you'll see that in these days, when you open the books, you talk about what is happening in Ebonyi, what is happening in Plateau, what is happening here and there. Communities, for one reason or the other, go into a lot of conflicts. And in such conflict, it creates a lot of challenges to even the security operatives, especially the police that are to intervene. For example, if a community invades another community, by the time police are going, the invaders may run away. The community that now mobilize weapons to defend themselves will be the people that the security people will see with weapons, and they will arrest them. And of course, the feeling of the people is that they are biased. They did not attack those who invaded us. They are coming to even take the little weapons we have to defend ourselves. So it becomes more complex for security operatives to manage this kind of situation. The understanding of what is happening, how do we prevent this early enough? And I believe most of these security conflicts are happening because of the weakness of the lower tiers of government. The local government system that's supposed to interface with communities directly and prevent this is dead in this country. And not because what you see a local government getting is, like when I was a deputy governor, I used to query some of my chairmen. They had more aides than me as a deputy governor of Bayelsa State then. They have so many boys, maybe thugs, all kinds of character around them, and they will be moving as if they own the world. But in terms of governance, nothing is happening at the local government level. The community engagement is so weak. It's not the federal government that will have the structures to engage the communities. But the local governments, since the local governments are mainly managed by the states now, because we are told that some states even take their money, I think the states must have strong departments that will coordinate the affairs of these local governments. And these departments must have regular meetings with traditional rulers and community development committees to assess the threat levels in these communities. And if they detect the threat level early enough, and if they cannot contain it, they will be able to escalate it upward to the level of the IG or Chief of Army Staff, or depending on where the level of security threat. I believe that will help. But what we have now, that communities will have a lot of tension in the communities, the weakness of the lower level of government that can manage this, and they wait until major conflicts before the central government will send troops, will never help to solve our problems. One of the problems we have is this skewed and nebulous warped ideology that people create, sometimes come under religious guise. But it reminds me of a book published 2019, written by Mark Manson, with a very funny title, Everything is Fucked, a book about hope. He's a psychologist, and when you read the part of that book, talks about creating your own religion. And when you first see creating a religion, as a Christian or a Muslim, begin to say, what does this man say? But what it says that, which is what is happening in society, is that some young people or some people with warped ideology wake up, get some funny messaging, and get some people to follow them, and the first thing to do is to confront the state, because that is the only way you can quickly get followers. You antagonize the civil authorities. So you can create a religion. In a political setting, it's very easy to do it. You attack the leadership of the political process, and people, especially people who feel they are not getting what they're supposed to get, they're going to follow. And I may not want to mention things that are going on now, but if we think back in the 80s, the Mycenaean religious crisis was purely environmental challenges that faced some group of people. They moved into the cities. They had no means of livelihood, and somebody created a religion and just get them in. And became a major crisis in Kano, in Maiduguri, in Yola, in Gombe, that made the military to step in. If it is a purely civilian setting, it would have been more difficult. But then it was the military government, and of course they were able to crush these riots. That is somebody creating religion. I give so many examples, but I don't want to create a lot of controversies here. But that is key. People with warped ideas create some kind of religion, get followership, and of course, in most cases, they must be anti-government. A lot of social issues will come up. We believe that, yes, social pressures to survive may be a reason for insecurity, but some of these basic conflicts are there. Ethnicity, called rivalry, contestation for political powers. Insecurity and conflicts. Security is a core value of human life. The United Nations Development Program idea of human security speaks to the dignity. Sorry, I'm mixing up. The most violent and violent kind of crisis in Nigeria today is the one based on ideology and promoted and funded by people with low knowledge and understanding of religious issues. This gives rise to terrorism and violent extremism, which, if not well contained, will destroy the fabrics of our society. Our country has been battling terrorism for almost 2 decades, and we are yet to completely decimate the ranks of the terrorists. While the efforts to dislodge the terrorists continue, I believe that we should reinforce our civic engagement mechanisms and strengthen the structures for resilience and religious tolerance to avoid threats from terrorists in the future. In doing this, we should also encourage volunteers from the major religions and different ideological bases to work together towards uniting our people and bringing them to understand our religious and ideological differences. This is what obtains in other countries where adherents of different religions coexist in an atmosphere devoid of bitterness, hate, and acrimony. I believe that government and probably even civil society like my own foundation should look into it. We should be able to recruit volunteers from these religions to work together to preach this gospel that we can coexist without conflict. I have been involved in observing elections in a number of African countries. And one of the greatest things I noticed in Nigeria is that in our political processes, there was so much emphasis on religious issues. Even within West Africa, you hardly notice that. Some of them are here now, observers. Some of them are here now. But religion does not play a major role. Immediately I leave here, I'm going to the Gambia. Luckily, I think 1 or 2 persons here from the Gambia. Some of us who are members of the West African Elders Forum feel that elections are coming on the 4th of December, and there is tension that is growing. And we need to move in early enough to engage the key stakeholders so that the election will not degenerate into kind of violence. But people were not talking about religion. They talk about other issues. Religious differences and religious conflicts are the worst to manage because of sentiments. And as a nation, we must do everything to bring this religious conflict down if we must develop. We must come up with models of managing our peculiar situation. I believe that relevant civic education should take care of some of this. I believe in Nigeria, our children have not been educated enough, especially in religious issues. Before this time, people of my age, especially in the northern part of the country, attended a number of Catholic schools or missionary schools. Some of them, I remember, was it 1972 or 70, between 72 and 75. The person that has the best grade in Christian religious studies was a Muslim. And it was made very public then. But it does not change the young man. He did not become a Christian. But he studied the Christian religions because they attended, I think, a missionary school, a Catholic school or so. And he had the best grade, better than the people who were even born. So I believe that we must have a way of educating our young people, especially at the basic education level. Whether their parents are Christians, they should know the tenets of Islam, how beautiful that religion is. Whether their parents are Muslim, they should know the tenets of Christianity, how good that religion is, that both religions talk about peaceful coexistence. But what we see today is rather brainwashing the children, that when they meet, they begin to see themselves as enemies, instead of seeing themselves as people belonging to a country, just belonging to different religious blocks. We need to do something. An organization, an institution like this can also come up through research and come up with a kind of a template. And I believe we need to modify the syllabus for civic education. Our children should know what we are. And the knowledge of something helps you. When you understand something, it helps you to manage it. One of the greater problems we have again is this cult rivalry, cultism. It's more prominent in southern Nigeria than in northern Nigeria. But cultism is a major problem, and especially communities where universities are cited. The issue of cultism started in those days to talk about pirates and so on. But today it has developed to the extent that even in primary schools, you have cult groups. In the villages, you have cult groups. And sometimes these cult groups can hold a section of a state or a section of a city ransom and be controlling that section for weeks or sometimes months. And in that case, every young man will want to join because he wants to move freely. And you begin to see that that is the way to go. So, and this is happening, just like as I said, because the governance at the local government level has collapsed completely. So if there is a system that can pick this information and intervention is done early, it don't allow it to gain ground and escalate. It will stop the recruitment process of getting younger people to join. And whether you are a cultist or any group of persons that are involved in criminal acts must be dealt decisively according to law. And the next problem that we are facing is the contestation for political power. Of course, I am a politician, so that is where I belong. Contestation for political power is now a major crisis point in Africa. Nigeria is a good example, and other African countries. And when a country is immersed with major political conflict, it frightens investors. And you cannot really develop economically when the political process is not stable. For example, when we are moving towards the 2015 election that he mentioned, the commandant mentioned, I remember the information I got was that some Nigerians, they even moved their families out of the country, 2015. The security report I got was not too good. People were so much afraid because of the activities of politicians that wherever this result go, whether the incumbent President Jonathan wins or the contestant Buhari wins, there will be crisis. And of course, the US predicted that by 2015, Nigeria was going to disintegrate. With that prediction, and with the behavior of people charging for war, so many people were frightened. Nobody can bring his money to invest in a country where there is not politically stable. And one of the reasons why, as you mentioned, I called Buhari before the announcement of the results is I don't want a situation where people can pre-prove them. If I waited for the results to be announced, I don't know what would have happened in some parts of the country. Either my supporters may be reacting in one way or the other, or Buhari supporters may be reacting in one way or the other, but at the end of the day, there would have been conflicts and crisis. And it could snowball to a bigger challenge to the country. And to douse that, I have to preempt the behavior of people. And just like we talk about the weakness of governance at the local level in terms of managing our security challenges, one key thing is, again, the institutions. If institutions are strong, they can manage certain conflicts early. And if institutions are in countries where institutions are strong, political leaders don't over-control the institutions. But where political leaders over-control the institutions are weak. It is a fertile ground for crisis. Because when people feel that a government institution deprives them from what they're supposed to get because of a political actor's interest, people will resort to self-help. And this self-help is one of the greatest problems we have in Nigeria. So one key thing about managing our economy is people should have confidence. I will summarize that in my conclusion. And in that case, the institutions must be strong. For example, we are talking about the Department of State Services. Department of State Services must be strong. While they are protecting the people who are holding political offices, they must be protected. They must also protect every Nigerian. And they must not be used against other Nigerians. If the institutions are strong, even the president cannot push a head of institution to do things that they don't believe in. If you go to America, the head of police will say their loyalty is to the state, not even to their president. So that is a key thing. One thing, again, is the issue of unemployment. I will discuss a little more when I discuss general diversification of the economy. But where you have, in Africa, where you have this youth bulge, where we have so many unemployed youth, while they say that the idle mind is the devil's workshop, there's always the tendency for this idle mind to be used for antisocial activities. One thing linked up with employment is tackling unemployment is the issue of education. Just like Nelson Mandela would say that when you educate people, you really leave them, you give them the power and the weapon to know what is happening in the environment and how they can shape themselves. Education is key. And if we don't give functional education, not just people going to school and acquiring certificates, but education must be functional. If we don't give our youth functional education, of course, we will have problems. I always used to say that a nation does not spend money in developing the youth, in giving them functional education. That nation will spend the money in managing issues of insecurity. The number of out-of-school children in Nigeria is getting a bit alarming. The state governors must work very hard. It's not the federal government that manages primary schools and secondary schools. When I was in office, I have to step in at the time to even attempt to build some schools. Now we call them Nigerian schools. I know that some of the governors probably were not too happy, but then they didn't tell me they were not happy. It was when I left office that I had, but how will the governor not happy? Because we use the federal government money from the University of Basic Education, and it's just to partner with the state to create a good learning environment. And I did that because of my knowledge of my Nigerian religious crisis. And my Nigerian recruited so many of these young boys who have no hope. Because the traditional Amajiri education that was common in the north is they expose them only to Islamic education. And at the end of the day, even their local governments don't employ them. So you get people that are educated, but they are still isolated in society as if they have not acquired an education. And when you go to the Quranic issues, they feel they are even better than who have degrees. But then society don't absorb them because they don't have the Western education attached to it. So how do we manage to get these people properly integrated into society? So not just going through the Amajiri program, but to be able to go through that, go to a university, and get degrees in any field they want. They can become professors of Islamic law if they want. And with the Amajiri education, without building the Western education into it, they are so limited. And these are people like gunpowder that people can just carry and use it to cause violence. And that is why we started the Al-Majri educational program. I believe that that program is good, but could be modified based on the circumstances of every state. The governor should not just throw it, they should look at it, modify it, and run it in a way that we should not have this number of out-of-school children. When I was in office, when the UN published the data for basic education out-of-school children, a state like Zamfara has 71% of children that were out of school. I don't know whether the statistics have changed now. 71%, that doesn't even put 70%. That means that for every 10 children, only 3 have basic education, which is extremely dangerous. Zamfara had the worst record, 71%. Every 10 children, only 3. And we cannot continue to run our system that way, then we'll be in trouble. Diversification of the economy. Just like I said, people talk about this every day on television. But what I will just use it for our conversation is that, look, economy that depends on only one source of income, like mono economy depending on only oil and gas, cannot thrive. Because the prices of oil is not dictated by Nigerians. The price of gas is not dictated by us. So at any time the oil prices go down, we're in trouble. So as a nation, we know the key area is how to diversify economy. And that also links up with the issue of job creation. I know this present government is doing something about job creation by young people. In my time, we came up with the concept of the U-Wing, where we wanted to encourage the establishment of small and medium-scale industries. And we tried to mentor some young people who have vision and give them grants to start their industries. We can start from even adding value to our food from our farms and our forest produce, and the minerals from our soil. We should not be exporting just raw materials. The problem of Africa is we export core raw material. You produce cocoa. The person who buys the cocoa export the product, chocolate back to you, and make more money than you that plant the cocoa. The same thing for coffee, the same thing for tea, for everything. And we can encourage young people. These industries are supposed not to be very big industries. And if we can encourage young people, CBN has been intervening in so many of these agri-related programs. But if it is properly focused and young people who have visions are encouraged, then of course, you will see small industries sprouting up in different parts of the country. And for us to create jobs, we must industrialize. You cannot create jobs, but there's a limit of number of people the government can employ. For us to get jobs for young people, we must create jobs. And that means that even our tax policies must not just be about making money, but we must encourage investment. Sometimes you have clash between those who want the economy to grow and those who want to raise money for government. If you're in charge of raising money for government, you want to Manchester generated 200 billion this year. So whether the industries are collapsing, you don't care. Our tax policies must encourage investment. And if our tax policies don't encourage investment, it's what you call penny wise, pound foolish. Because the key problem of government is employment. Yes, we should make money so that we can pay salaries, maintain infrastructure, and so on and so forth. But we must have tax policies that we can take care of the young people. Let me conclude. The vision of sustainable development in Nigeria relies heavily on the inclusiveness of growth-driven policies. This involves building a system that improves security, education, infrastructure, manpower development, and youth entrepreneurship to drive economic activities. To build a resilient, a nation like ours needs to address high unemployment and poverty levels. Nigeria must take advantage of a post-COVID-19 economy. Luckily, it was mentioned that the vice president's already taken along that line. The post-COVID-19 economy to deepen its economic diversification programs by boosting manufacturing, agriculture, processing, as well as services, and especially the northern industry that is controlling the world. For the economy to be competitive, the manufacturing sector's contribution to our GDP must be enhanced. Now it's just about 12%, which is low. Until the manufacturing sector can get up to 30 to 45%, we will still be where we are. In fact, I was to speak on the economy, and one of the aspects was I supposed to have discussed the economic situation in the country today and our projection to tomorrow and the challenges we'll have. But I believe as a former president, I will not stand before you to discuss the Nigerian economy today. I believe the scholars are those who can do that, either in the classroom or in some kind of public setting. Because when you are discussing economy, a lot of misunderstandings may come up. And people may not believe, it's very elastic. What you say, another person will say it differently. So we are all Nigerians, so we have an idea about the challenges we are facing. So many African countries are facing the challenges. But one message I have to say before I leave is that what drives economy in all nations is confidence. What drives, yes, professors of economy, some of them, I guess they are here, can tell you all the jargons, but as a summary, what drives economy in any nation is confidence. And that is key because I'm discussing this in a security institution like this. If you look at even those who review, when you say that, those who, how do you call it, position economics on nation, how do you call them? These are that give you BB plus or the rating, yes. If your economy is very good, say this is December, and the economy of Nigeria is very good, and even if they give us, say, BB plus, assuming we have elections by March next year, as if they are reviewing this economy towards next year, they may reduce it to BB minus. But if your economy is even very strong and will leave you at the BB plus, they'll say with negative focus. Nothing that changed. All what they are saying is that they are afraid that the election could lead to crisis, and that could affect the economy. And the idea of rating countries is to give investors understanding of where they should carry the money to. Because like business people will say money is a coward. Money runs away from crisis, except those who deal in arms and munitions. That's where they go in. And even those people, they will not, even those people, they will not go there. They will stay in the US and look for scapegoats to carry their arms and ammunition into those places. Other investors, money is a coward. So that a nation wants to go into election alone makes them to downgrade the economy in one way because of fear. And one thing again, if you remember when Abiola contested his election, a lot of investors within and outside Nigeria believed so much in Abiola because he was a robust businessman. As at that time, today maybe we'll talk about Dangote. It was almost like the richest Nigerian then, robust investment and so on. When it was clear that Abiola was going to win the election, the stock market started going up. Nothing had changed. But the confidence people have in the economy that with Abiola, the economy of Nigeria will boom, the stock market started going up. So confidence is key. And in a situation where investors don't have confidence in a nation, then we're in trouble. They must have confidence in the policies of government. They wouldn't want a situation where they will bring their money in today then the policy will change tomorrow. So the policies of government must be consistent and must be investment friendly. They must also have confidence in our courts, because in businesses you must have disputes. They want to know, even if they have disagreement with government, and if they go to a Nigerian court, they want to see that the court gives judgment based on the law, not bent based on who has an interest. So investors must have confidence in our courts. And of course, investors must also have confidence in our security. Where people feel a bit insecure, it frightens them. And that's one thing now. I'll use this opportunity to plead with us. This concept of whistleblowing. Those departments of government are using, it's a good thing to use whistleblowers because it helps to give you information. But if that information should be slightly investigated, be sure before you strike. Because I have a friend that in 2016, 2017, they break into his house 2 times. A department of government. The gate was broken, doors were broken, safes were broken, drawers were broken, nothing was found. He has to repair this himself. If you want to, assuming he's a businessman, he's a businessman. Assuming he has a business partner that is bringing $500 million, $500 million to invest in Nigeria with him, and the man they enter this man's house, the man will collect his money and run. So the so-called whistleblowers, it should be modified so that security agencies don't go into voids of discovery. Those of you and lawyers know that the courts will tell you not to go into voids of discovery. Tell us your case and hold on to your case. If you don't have any case, don't come here. So if security agencies will have to go into voids of discovery, we have to invade houses, break in, and because somebody suspects that something is there, the damage you have done to society is so enormous in terms of investment interest, in terms of the economy. You are injuring the economy because you are frightening people who really want to come in and invest. I'm quite pleased with what has happened in the way the security people tackled the just delays invasion of our house. At least people were arrested and being investigated properly, and everybody know that the security operatives want to know what happened. Because if things are not done properly, people will exploit it for their own advantage. If I'm a businessman and employ somebody, and maybe if for one reason or the other, I sack that person, okay, I will deal with you. You go and tell one of these security services, that man has dollars in his house. And of course, they will invade the house. They will break this, break that. And at the end of the day, if nothing happens, nobody cares to even apologize to you. And the person who gives the wrong information also walks away. So people who give wrong information to security operatives should be punished. In as much as the issue of whistleblowing is okay, it will help to control us. It must be done in a way that we should not use it to injure our economy. I thank you all.